Hey guys, welcome back to another Random Day Rough Cut knife review. This time the Kershaw NATRIX. Very affordable Chinese-made Kershaw that follows the same lines, the same design as the 0770 from Zero Tolerance. A lot of great design to talk about with this knife, a lot of value that you get with it for the money, and just a lot of satisfaction as far as aesthetics are concerned too, as well as ergonomics. But we're going to talk about all that stuff. I'm going to compare it to several other knives, give you kind of my overall recommendation on this knife and all that stuff throughout the video, so stick around. All right, so let's knock out a few of the basic details and specs on this knife before we get around to more of the opinion stuff and comparisons to other knives, which I will be showing you too. So first off, blade length 3 1/4 inches, the overall length 7.5 inches from tip to stern, I guess you could say. The handle length 4 1/4, the handle thickness about 0.43, which it actually feels thinner than that to me, but yeah, I'll take it. That's what they're speccing here. And the weight is under 3 ounces at 2.9. So very carryable, very usable. As far as the size is concerned, fills my hand well enough. Not a lot hanging out over here, but I get a good 3-finger grip plus a little bit of pinky on it, as you can see there. So good enough to get some good work done, plus that nice little ramp for your thumb and a nice little bit of jimping right there on the top as well. A couple more details on it. You can see that this is G10 right here and on that side as well, and we've got a black wash blade on it. A lot of different varieties of this knife, different handle types, different blade. I think they're more or less the same blade material. 8CR13 MOV I think is the only one that it comes in. Could be wrong on that. But different finishes that you can get as well. This one is the sub-frame lock type. So it's G10. Those are not just handle scales, they're more or less the handle. So all of this right here is the handle. Inside of that, just nested inside of it, I think you can see the steel plate right there. Underneath that steel plate, between that and the other side of that G10, is a torsion bar that creates the speed safe mechanism to give you that really fast spring assisted opening. So that's kind of how that whole construction works. But like I said before, subframe lock, so this whole lock right here is connected to the G10, more or less embedded and anchored to that to create the lockup that we need that functions very similarly to a liner lock or a frame lock from the user's perspective. As far as the mechanics, as far as the durability of it, there's probably some differences, but we're not going to get into all of that. As far as the rest of the construction is concerned, you can see a nice spacer back there. It looks like a Zytel or FRN or something like that. Some cool little cutouts in it, just giving you some breathing room, which, you know, just aesthetically makes it look a bit cooler and also gives the functionality of, you know, being able to get dust out of there maybe a little bit more easily. As far as the pocket clip, you can see that it is very, very deep carry. All right, so that is going to bury pretty much 100% in your pocket, which is awesome. And you can see also that it flips to the opposite side, so right hand or left hand, either one of you are going to be comfortable using that. As far as lanyard hole, I don't see one. I guess you can kind of put one through the pocket clip, and that's probably the extent of lanyard attachment right there. I don't use a lot of lanyards usually, so it doesn't bother me that there isn't something a little more prominent, a little more big for using it for a lanyard. Prices on this guy range from about 30 bucks to about 40 bucks. I believe there's a copper version of it. I don't remember what that costs. I want to say it's in the $50 range or more. It's pretty sexy. It's a bit heavier, but very, very sexy. For me, this version right here was all I was interested in. Having seen this knife and looked at it pretty good detail and depth at SHOT Show 2018, I knew I needed to pick one up for myself and do a review on. But in doing that, you know, there were so many different varieties to look at and to choose from. The one that stood out to me is this version with this sort of steel gray color and that black wash finish. I just think it's gorgeous. The NATRIX is basically a copy of the 0770 from ZT, or Zero Tolerance. As ZT and Kershaw are all owned by Kai Knives, it's not like that's a legal issue to copy the knife. What they did basically is just create a really affordable version of that 0770, since it was such a popular and aesthetically amazing knife. They just created a really affordable version, made by Kershaw, made in China. So again, 8CR13 MOV steel as opposed to, I want to say it was S30V. I never owned it, the 0770, so correct me down in the comments section if I'm getting it wrong. But different materials and, you know, USA made workmanship. So for me though, this Chinese version of it is a lot of fun to play with, ergonomically great, aesthetically spectacular. I'm loving every piece of it. Another thing to point out that makes it very different from the 0770 is this big groove right here in the blade. 0770 does not have that. So that's one thing that really sets it apart. A few other details as far as the contours and so forth, as far as probably the 3D contours of it. But just look at the sort of the 2D profile of it. It's very much the same knife, and I think most of you guys will agree with that. One last thing I want to point out before I move on to comparisons is this pivot. Check that out. Very, very cool looking pivot. And by the way, that whole thing there is not simply aesthetic, that is the entire screw. That's the screw head right there. You can see the opposite side is locked in. So that's the receiving side of that, and that is, like I said, locked into the G10, so that's milled out perfectly to hold that. So that will not move when you're turning this. What's interesting is that this pivot head can rotate without any tools, or at least I found it to be easy to do. So that gigantic head right there with these grooves down in it like that, I can easily turn that with my fingers. Now I've turned it pretty tight right now, so I don't think I'll be able to get it to turn, but if you get that loose, let's see if I can just do it. Yeah, there we go. Watch this. There, you see that? I'm loosening and tightening it right like that, just with my fingers. So if you happen to get this pivot a little too loose, you can actually get it tight enough just by locking your fingers into those little grooves and turning it just with your fingers. By the way, that creates a tight enough lockup that it's like you were using a Torx screwdriver on that. It's tight enough. Now, the downside of that is it's so big, it can kind of catch a lot of that surface area there, and it can sort of come loose on its own, and I've had it do that a few times. But you can retighten it, and also there's blue Loctite. You just get a little bit of that in there, and that'll stop it from moving when you don't want it to. So I don't see it to be a problem. Ultimately, I like it. Aesthetically really cool, and kind of cool that you can turn it with your fingers. All right, a couple comparisons. Let's get into one of the first, and I would say one of the big competitors that this Kershaw knife has, and that is against itself, or it's within its own brand. That's the Kershaw Leek. Okay, the Leek's smaller, it's thinner, not cheaper, USA made, generally better materials as well. 40 bucks or so, maybe 50 bucks or so for this one. Better steel on it, it's that Sandvik steel. You can get it in this frame lock or in an aluminum scaled liner lock version. I like the Leek better, generally speaking, because of the materials that it's built with. The NATRIX, however, there's definitely a place for it. Onto a non-Kershaw brand, there's the Spyderco Delica, all right, in full flat ground with the Zome scale coloring done. Obviously these are a bit smaller, the couple I've shown you so far. This one, I think a 3-inch blade, that 3 1/4. This one with VG10 steel and FRN, whereas that is 8CR13 MOV steel. So I'm giving you comparisons for utility rather than necessarily comparisons for quality. I said VG10, that's the standard steel on this. This is actually an S30V variety of the knife, as you can see right there. This one's a little more off the radar, but really cool. That is the steel wheel cut jack, the mini cut jack, or the urban cut jack, or whatever you want to call them. I'm so confused by the naming on these things. This one, much more expensive. Quality, very good. Italian made, M390 steel on it, G10, blue, really nice looking. Liner lock, yeah, good ergonomics on it and all that stuff. And great aesthetics too. I think the cut jack's a really good looking knife. Again, for utility, these two stack up against each other pretty nicely, but this one blows the NATRIX out of the water as far as quality of materials. Lastly, and here's a very expensive one that is pretty different. That is the UTX 85 from Microtech, and I've owed you guys a review on this knife for a long, long time. I'm going to finish it up here soon, I promise. And that one, again, as far as utility, stacks up nicely against it. This one, LMAX steel, yep, that's what it says on the blade. Aluminum handle construction and that OTF function. A lot to say about the durability of that function and other issues that I had with this knife. I'm going to talk about all of that in the review for the UTX 85, so stick around for that. But as you can see, as far as utility, the two knives stack up pretty well against each other. All right, this brings us to sort of my closing thoughts, closing opinions on the Kershaw NATRIX. Do I recommend it? Absolutely, but to who and for what? This is definitely a knife that folks who don't have a huge knife collection will love. And I'm talking about the guy who wants maybe 3 to 6 knives. Maybe he's thinking, you know, I want one for dress occasions, I want one for outdoor occasions, I want one for general utility, whatever. That guy is not looking to spend, from my experience, not looking to spend a ton of money on each knife. Probably sub $100 per knife. If you show him this knife right here at 40 bucks, he's gonna be like, that is an outstanding utility knife. It looks really cool. I'll be proud to have that in my pocket. I want it. And that's generally the case, all right? Also, I think collectors who are happy to get into, you know, variants perhaps of ZT knives, but also just some of the cool new Kershaws that come out, because generally speaking, Kershaw pumps out fairly inexpensive knives, a lot of fairly inexpensive knives every year. Given that fact, there's always something new to pick up from them that isn't going to break the bank. Not going to punch a huge hole in your wallet. The Kershaw NATRIX definitely wins in all of those ways, and as something that will just be a general utility knife, a general EDC knife that you'll be able to resharpen pretty frequently and just get a lot of enjoyment out of looking at and using, Kershaw NATRIX is a win. Thanks for watching. I'm the Late Boy Scout. See you later.